In the 1920s, Canada's economy was booming. It seems as if the sun was on our side. We were doing a lot of trading with the US, and everyone seemed to be making money. Take this woman, for example. Instead of staying home, cooking and cleaning, she's sporting off her new expensive car with her son. Also note her clothing and how nice, new, and neat it is. Also note how her son is expensively dressed as well. Little would they know that it would all change during the 1930s. The 1930s was a far cry from the 1920s. Instead of sporting off nicely dressed wives and hot cars, these men were standing on the streets looking for jobs, and in this case, winter relief. Thanks to the stock market crash, everyone was out of business and looking for work. People were taking jobs that only paid 10 cents a day, but it was better than standing on the streets like this, hungry, broke, and miserable. But there were some places for these gentlemen to go. Soup kitchens were one of the saving graces of the 1930s. People could go and eat tiny bits of food to keep them going for a little while longer as they stood in the streets looking for work. However, not everything was sunshine and rainbows at the soup kitchen. Since the soup kitchen was also broke, they used whatever they could find to make soup, which was not the healthiest choice. It was bad enough that these men were skinny, sickly, but sometimes eating the mystery soup led to diarrhea and stomach flu. When one was in the soup kitchen, it was hard to remember when food was enjoyed with music and happiness. Back in the 1920s, the food was good and the jazz was hot. Dances like the jitterbug and the foxtrot were daily practices, and people were being more free to express themselves through the arts. Take a listen to the song showing how just upbeat and happy everything was.
I'm so happy, what's mine? Oh, so happy all the while. You should try it, I'm on a diet.
But as we know, 10 years later, the lifestyle changed drastically. People were out of jobs and out of money. They could not even afford the gas in their car, so they got the horse to do the job instead. These little car and horse numbers were called Bennett buggies, to poke fun at the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. R.B. Bennett, who was only making promises and not doing any work for it. It was hard for people to like Bennett, since they were standing in the streets cold and hungry, while he was nice, warm, and safe in his big penthouse suite. Also, it didn't help that people were also losing their homes. This photo depicts just that. The eviction was a big part of the 1930s. Many Canadians were thrown out of their houses and onto the streets with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Since they did not have the money to pay the mortgage, they soon found themselves watching in despair as their house and all of their household belongings were sold for $1 or less. This song depicts the feelings of those times.
Try to smile and pretend all the while, but since you went away, what's the use? I try to clown just to hide every frown, but my heart seems to say, what's the use?
Now, with all this depression, sadness, and grief, you would have to admit that most Canadians were pretty mad at the government for not doing anything, especially single young men who were sent to relief camps, which only paid them 10 cents a day for hard, dangerous labor. They could not stand the conditions any longer. They used the camps to plan their riot against the government. And soon after, men met up at Vancouver, hopped on trains, and began to ride down to Ottawa to speak to the government about their issues. Along the way, men joined up, and soon a big convoy was created. Sadly, these boys would never have their say, since they were stopped in Halifax by police on the orders of R.B. Bennett, who did not wish to speak to them. However, to calm the minds of the people, he agreed to allow the leaders of the rally to come to Toronto under police escort. However, after arriving in Toronto, they were denied once again, resulting in one of the worst riots Canada has ever seen. One police officer even was killed. Shortly after this incident, Bennett was voted out and King was voted back in. Speaking of King, here he is in the happier times in the 1920s, when Canada was winning its independence, and King was leading the way. He was the man who wanted Canada to be able to sign an international treaty without a British representative. This was a big move for Canada, since he publicly challenged Britain's influence over Canada. This caused the King-Byng crisis of 1925. But King was not the only one making big moves in Canada for more power. Agnes Mapheel was the first woman elected in the House of Commons. This was a breakthrough for women. Now they had someone in the House not only speaking for the men of Canada, but as the woman as well. This led women to take on more jobs, like lawyers and professors. Here you see Agnes showing off her bust to some colleagues after its revealing. Sadly, the pressures of being the only female in the House of Commons got to Agnes, and she slowly backed away instead of facing the stares of Canadians waiting for her to mess up.